With that, I'm going to welcome in Greg DePalma, our producer. We're going to do what we call our roundtable here. Greg's got some questions he wants answers to, and we're all open to it. So, Greg, if you will, welcome to the roundtable.
All right. Thanks, guys. Want to remind everybody that we are now inching closer to our previous goal of 500 subscribers. We're at 496. So keep subscribing to the channel here. And that means as soon as we get to 500, we're trying to get to 6. So hopefully we'll return, of course, next week. And hey, you know what? A lot of people are going to be home over the holidays. Maybe they'll be spending a lot of time online. And make sure to hit that subscribe button. 600 will be our next goal. Once again, 1,000 by the end of the entire 2023 season, including the Super Bowl. That's our goal. I do have to ask you guys: are there any Thanksgiving Day trends that you would pick at and say, yeah, this is the one that we need to pay attention to the most? Or have there really not been enough quality trends lately that warrant a discussion?
Well, I might take a lead on that because I just wrote the NFL games up for our newsletter today, so it's a little bit semi-fresh in my mind while I can remember it. What has worked real well in the National Football League NFL games has been, surprisingly, home favorites of more than 7 points. They've really, really played really well, but especially if they're taking on an opponent that comes in off a win. So look up and down your card. You'll see 2 home favorites playing on Thanksgiving Thursday that are favorites of more than 7, Detroit and Dallas in those 2 football games. And I think Dallas is taking on an opponent that's off a win. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. No. Totally not. Or is it
Washington lost?
Or Detroit? Who's Detroit playing?
Yes, Detroit's Green Bay had a win last week. Yeah.
There you go. So Detroit would be in the best of that particular role, and the numbers are really kind of mind-boggling. I'm talking like up in the a 24-4 range for situations like that. That's if laying more than 7 points is your cup of tea. It's not mine, but it's at least what's in the database. Victor, is anything you saw as far as Thanksgiving Day trends go?
Well, you covered the main issue. It is the chalkiest Thanksgiving slate we've ever seen, with all 3 games now at 7 points or higher. It is the first time the Lions have been favored on Thanksgiving since way back in 2016. We mentioned last week how hot they had been against fellow division opponents, of course, until they didn't cover last week.
Yep.
In that come from behind win against the Chicago Bears. But still, we can't still ignore the fact that they have still been very, very good from an ATS perspective in division play. And then finally, I would throw out the fact that the Cowboys are 1-11 ATS in their last 12 Thanksgiving games.
Yeah, people don't realize that.
1-5 ATS,
Yep.
as they tend to let the team come from behind in the back door in the second half of the game.
What was that line again, Victor?
1-11.
I said 1-11 for the Cowboys their last 12 Thanksgiving games. Dak Prescott 1-5, of course, ATS. You see multiple different scenarios where they let a team come in the back door in the second half, or in this case, in the fourth quarter of that Turkey Day game.
Okay,
of course, the Commanders are coming in off a game where they allowed Tommy DeVito to destroy them.
Right, yes, they are.
Allowed him to become a legend, huh?
Yeah, and the new Tommy DeVitos, as we get more and more starting quarterbacks that we've never seen before this year. Well, we have seen at least start, and that was a few years ago. But we got Tim Boyle for the Jets, and then you mentioned before Jake Browning for the Bengals. So maybe we're in one of those situations where they're going to rally around these first-time starters. I will say that even though they don't have much credibility thus far, Browning would be the more interesting because they're the better team, obviously. And he also had a very, very good career in college. And so I am very interested to see if Jake Browning can look. He won the job as the second-string quarterback, so. Sometimes these quarterbacks just need a little bit of time, and this is Jake Browning's opportunity. So we'll see if he could take advantage of it. Forget about Tim Boyle. He's got no chance. Okay, so yeah. Zach's probably going to be laughing under his breath when Tim Boyle runs for his life and the players are dropping passes. So what I did notice is that there are 5 lines this week where a team is favored by between 1 and 1.5. And 11 of the lines are minus 3.5 or under. And I think this is what speaks to the mediocrity that Mr. Tom Brady was talking about just recently. So I don't know if you guys agreed with what Tom Brady said the other day.
Oh, absolutely.
Andy, did you break that down any at all in your logical approach newsletter about lines in that various price range?
I have in the past, as far as I looked at something a few weeks ago for straight up results, and I think in the past I have broken things down, especially when it comes to playing teasers. You like to take underdogs in that 2.5 to or 2 to 3.5 point range and tease them up over 7 and 8. I don't have the current numbers as far as in that 1 to 2 range as far as how often that goes. Although I do recall from a study I did a few years ago that road teams in that small underdog role have had unusually strong success on the money line and winning those games, even though they're small road underdogs.
Yeah, the theory there would be if you're not getting a bigger home favorite, the road team is basically the better team. So, I mean, you look at this Cleveland Broncos game, 1.5, 2. I mean, I'm not going to say the Browns are the better team because they have a backup quarterback. He's played one full game, but that's the theory that a lot of people have. If you get a line like that, you're looking at a better team on the road because the home team doesn't even get enough to make them the favorite. So it's the better team is on the road. In that particular case, that may not be the case because the Broncos have played very well lately.
As far as Thanksgiving, first of all, do you guys think that the NFL should have at least 1 or 2 out of the 3 Thanksgiving Day games as rematches every year? And usually, of course, there'll be a rivalry. And speaking of rivalries, part B of that question would be, right now, what is your favorite NFL rivalry?
That's a good question. I guess a lot of that's going to be determined, Greg, by where you live. What team you follow, who you like, what part of the country you grew up in.
Cleveland, Pittsburgh for all you Ohio guys.
Yeah, that's a pretty fierce one. There's nobody in Pittsburgh that likes the Browns, and we can almost say the same thing about the Steelers.
You still believe in the Dallas-Washington rivalry?
Well, you know something? If you talk to the people in Philadelphia, you don't, because Philadelphia hates Dallas, and vice versa. So I guess it's all who's the new kid in the block, and who's the latest, I guess, in that sense. But Jim brings out a good point. I think that Cleveland-Pittsburgh rivalry has been what it is for the longest of time, and probably because of being 2 blue-collar cities that are within 90 miles of one another, and a lot of history between those 2 series. So that would be my vote. Victor, what would your vote be on any rivalry in the National Football League that you think stands out?
I'm a Cleveland, Northeastern Ohio guy too. It would have to be Pittsburgh, Cleveland, although Pittsburgh has dominated that series. One of the favorite T-shirt expressions that you see Pittsburgh Steeler fans wearing is "buck the frowns," and if you turn that around, you're really saying "fuck the Browns."
That's like the old Yankee Stadium T-shirts I would see the vendor selling. Buck Foston.
Right, there you go.
Same thing. I would also throw in the Ravens because of the Baltimore-Cleveland historical connection, and also because of that too, the Ravens and the Steelers. We always talk when that game comes up. Well, it's a 3-point game. If you can get +3 on either side, just take it in and year out. Especially since, and again, you've got in that situation Harbaugh and Tomlin, who have both been coaching for 15+ years, those teams. So there's a lot of recent history for the current generation of relatively new fans. But to Greg's other part of the question, I'd like to see a lot more, let's say, interconference elite matchups. Now, you don't know before the season starts who's going to be the best teams. You have a pretty good idea, but AFC versus NFC. And, of course, now on Thanksgiving, and I don't know if it's going to change anytime soon, Dallas and Detroit are going to host, two of the games. But now with the addition of the Friday game, it presents an additional opportunity in addition to the Thursday night game to A, have one of those attractive matchups, or B, and again, this may be difficult, and certainly the fans involved for the guest scheduled games, but the NFL has started in recent years to start flexing games late in the season. If all of a sudden a team expected to be great becomes a dud and they're scheduled to show up in prime time, why not use that? Maybe by the middle of middle of October, or certainly by Halloween, there's enough time to say for the NFL, for the fans involved, we're going to move a game from Thanksgiving weekend Sunday to the Thursday night game on Thanksgiving, because both of these teams are much better than we expected, or there's maybe some other aspects of intrigue that would justify such a move.
Hey, Jim, let me ask you this. We have Black Friday in the National Football League now. What chance is there that the National Football League will discontinue Black Friday in the NFL? I think we're going to see it for the rest of our lives.
I thought you were going to ask if they will have it for a doubleheader on Friday.
Right,
Oh,
doubleheader.
that'll
That would
come
be a
too.
BOGO, a Black Friday BOGO, yes.
Oh, by the way, I just went over that stat of the lines. So 11 lines, 3.5 or under. So get this. There's only one game being played on Sunday that has a line that is over that. In other words, all of the prime time games, the 3 Thanksgiving Day games and the Friday, those 4 games coming up on Thursday and Friday, all have the large lines of the week. In other words, it's like the biggest mismatches are the games on Thursday and Friday that are supposed to be the holiday games that everybody's going to want to be interested in. So
And we have mediocre Sunday, right?
Right. The only other game with a huge point spread is that Chiefs Raiders
yes,
game.
that's it.
Right.
Yep. Everything else is mediocrity, but at least more competitive. But those are the games that nobody's going to be able to watch unless you're in your specific region. Okay, so I wanted to ask about whether or not, because as a Jet fan, there's a lot of people wondering whether or not Robert Saleh will make it to next year. So I'm already thinking about, okay, well, who would I want as head coach? There's only 2 guys that I would want as head coach. So I want to ask you guys what you would think about either one of these, because I think these are going to be the 2 hottest guys. And which one would you choose? Jim Harbaugh, I know Marc is going to choose him, or Ben Johnson? So you've got Ben Johnson, the hot offensive mind of the Detroit Lions. He's the sexy, absolute, everybody's first choice, but he has no experience as a head coach. Or do you go to Jim Harbaugh, where he's got experience, you're probably going to win, but he's also a little bit older. How's he going to take to the NFL? Which way would you go if you were an NFL GM/owner? Would you go Jim Harbaugh, or would you take the chance with Ben Johnson?
Jim, who do you like?
Without a doubt, Jim Harbaugh. He has head coaching experience in college and pros. He's been successful everywhere. Ben Johnson's doing a great job, offensive coordinator, but jumping from any of the coordinator positions to head coach is a different job. There are a lot of different responsibilities. Instead of your own little lane that you're in, now you have to cover everything, and you got to give a lot of power away in certain areas, and not everybody delegates well. They can, and it does happen, but with Harbaugh, you've got a guaranteed win, and he knows how to do it at both levels, pro and he's been a player. So pro, college, player, I mean, he's the guy.
Victor?
Well, I think first off, it would depend on what is going to be our makeup on offense next season, the Jets. Is it a done deal that Aaron Rodgers is coming back next year? Or is it not? Or is it not? Ben Johnson may not want that job if he does not like the makeup of the New York Jets offense. I would say Jim Harbaugh, particularly if they give him pretty much total autonomy. I know that the Jets' best seasons over the last 20 years were probably the Rex Ryan years. Adam Gase didn't do much. Todd Bowles didn't do much. So give Harbaugh full power, and he may bring back a couple of those glory years that we saw with Rex Ryan when they made 2 AFC championships, I believe.
I'd like to jump in and say a little bit about the Jets. I think a lot of these kids that come out of college, I mean, they have potential. That's why they draft them. And I think they go into the pros, they usually go to a bad team. If you're a good player, you get drafted 1 or 2, you go to a bad team, and a lot of times the structure is terrible. I think the structure with the Jets is absolutely awful. I think got a defensive head coach. You got an offensive coordinator who has not been successful in that position anywhere that I can remember. You brought Aaron Rodgers in, and who does he bring with him? He brings Cook and Bob. I can't remember all the names.
Alan Lazard.
Lazard.
These are all has-beens. They're not at the top of their game, and they're all paid a lot of money. Their offensive line is horrible. They don't run the ball well. They don't block the for the quarterback. It's I'm not saying that Zach Wilson is a superstar, but I know damn well if he went to a different position, or a different head coach, like maybe Minnesota, with an offensive coordinator who knows what the hell he's doing, or a head coach that knows what the hell he's doing, they would be better than they are in a situation like that. And I think that the coaching in the NFL is they're so interested in keeping their job and not stepping out of the box too much that they're ruining potentially talented people that come into their group. And I think that's one of the things that I'm not saying that Zach Wilson will even be a good backup.
Sure, we don't know. Yeah,
I'm saying that, but I do not think in a developmental league, which is what we have now, probably 9 or 10 teams. It's a developmental league for their quarterback for sure, and their offensive lines are even worse than that. They don't have a chance, and that's why we have the kind of league we have, is because we've got a lot of old thinking. The structure is built with a lot of old thinking, and we need some new minds to get in there. I mean, you look at some of these teams with the better offensive coordinators, better head coaches that are offensive minded, they do a much better job than some of the crap that we're watching.
Well, that's why I brought up the combination, Andy, of Ben Johnson versus Jim Harbaugh, and Jim went with Jim Harbaugh. And yet he just talked about how the league is going to the hot, young coordinators, which is Ben Johnson. And again, I don't want to look at this as a Jet thing. Look at it as more as a league thing. If you're just a GM out there and you're looking to hire a head coach, which one would it be? Because you're going to have your pick of the two, I think.
Well, I'm going to answer that in a moment, because the first thing I'm going to say is I don't believe Robert Saleh's going anywhere.
I agree. I agree.
Their season was over when Aaron Rodgers went down on that first series of the game, and yet the Jets have managed to go 4-6 with a quarterback whom they had basically either given up on or said, you're 2 years away from you're going to learn behind Rodgers.
Yeah.
They had a 5-point loss to the Patriots, a 3-point loss to Kansas City, and they had a 4-point loss at the Raiders in Antonio Pierce's first game as interim coach for the Raiders. So I can't pin much of the blame on Robert Saleh. Now, so I think he's going to be back, likely with Rodgers. Zach Wilson, on the other hand, another story. They may just jettison him after, pardon the pun, jettison him after the season. But to answer your question, I would also choose Harbaugh over Johnson. But the other name I would throw out, and he consistently comes up, and yet we've seen his impact reflected in Kansas City, Eric Bieniemy. The Kansas City offense is nowhere as aggressive, is nowhere as dimensional as they were when he was the offensive coordinator. He's done some good things in Washington right now, but remember, it's his first season with a quarterback in Howell, really making his first, basically his rookie season as far as being a starting quarterback goes. So there's a name that I would throw out, and I might throw him out ahead of Ben Johnson, given Bieniemy's experience before and after Patrick Mahomes.
Well,
I think that's spot on, Andy. Spot on about the Eric Bieniemy situation and the problems and the woes that Kansas City has and is going through right now. They cannot find points, generate points in offense in the second half. It just so happens to be that Eric Bieniemy is no longer there. Andy Reid on the sidelines, if you're watching him, he looks lost. He looks like he's not even calling the plays half the time. He's got somebody else doing it. I think he totally misses Eric Bieniemy. Not that Bieniemy called plays, he never did, but at least he was the offensive coordinator on that football team, and that's totally missing this year.
But the thing though is that Bieniemy has had countless interviews, and everybody just keeps wondering, Victor, this what's wrong, especially because he's coming in. He's a black head coach, so as a minority, NFL teams are. I mean, they're looked at as this is a plus. You hire a minority head coach. Sometimes you don't even have to be as good as the other guy, but something's wrong. Something's wrong with those interviews, and I'm not sure that's going to change any. So maybe Washington is the only spot that he gets the head coaching job or opportunity.
And he deserves it because it looks like, Ron Rivera, who may last the season, who knows, but is probably his last year. So Bieniemy would make the logical choice there to take over as head coach, and he deserves it as well if we want to continue that to its logical conclusion. Mark mentioned the Chiefs. In the second half of their games this season, Kansas City's 0-10 over under. All 10 games have gone under in the second half. They're the best second half under team in what's been a great under second half season. They're the only team that has yet to go over the total in the second half of their games.
And a larger that has to do with the lack of Kansas City scoring in the second half of games this year.
Most of it. And the improvement of their defense, Andy, as well.
Yes, yeah.
They haven't scored a point in the last 3 games in the second half.
That's correct.
There's other coaching jobs that are likely to open up. Frank Reich in Carolina has done a terrible job.
Right, he's on the edge.
Staley should have been fired 2 years ago with the Chargers. I mean, there's other jobs that potentially will open up. And Harbaugh might have his choice of where he wants to live, where he wants to move his family, if he wants to leave Michigan. But I think somebody might pay that guy $50 million if they want to win. And David Tepper, who is very wealthy, very successful hedge fund guy out of Carolina with the Panthers, might be just that guy.
Yeah,
I would say this, Jim, about David Tepper and what's going on in that program. Frank Reich's not the answer. And if there's any one person I think David Tepper should fire is David Tepper. Especially after watching C.J. Stroud just rip this league apart and Bryce Young looking like he belongs in another level. I mean, my goodness, he's small, he's scant, he's not moving the offense. It was all Tepper's decision to bring him in. He was assistant upon it.
Who was Frank Reich in favor of?
With Cleveland. Who picked Johnny Manziel to go to Cleveland?
Who picked Johnny Manziel?
Some bum off the street is the guy. Was what I heard. Some drunk off the street is what I heard.
I'm not sure, Andy, who insisted on Bryce Young or whether or not Frank Reich gave that stamp of approval. I think he did not, but I think it was all Tepper who insisted.
I think Frank Reich wanted Stroud.
Yeah, there was a lot of there was a possibility of that, absolutely. And there you go. Maybe Ben Johnson, maybe he's the guy that you talk about Harbaugh. Maybe Tepper decides to give Ben Johnson a lot of money if Harbaugh isn't the guy because you got your quarterback here and you got your whiz offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
So
that might be the best fit, right?
Makes sense.
College, I just want to ask a few things before I let you go. I have to ask you guys, obviously, Michigan, Ohio State. Andy?
I like Ohio State for a number of reasons. It was one of the games I actually wrote up this week. Of course, they had that long history of domination over Michigan until the Wolverines won the past 2 years. So you do have that double revenge factor in play. I think that the other thing I like about Ohio State is their conditioning. They have often started slowly in the first half and then really caught fire after halftime. So that's a combination of being in condition and making adjustments. Both defenses are outstanding. I like the balance on Ohio State. And it just seems to be with the distraction that Michigan is having. And you also wonder, and maybe we're making too much of it, but maybe there was something to the teams knowing Michigan's signals. And that's why maybe they had that success against Ohio State the last couple of years after being outplayed by Ohio State and losing all those games in a row. I'm not to say that's a factor because we really don't know. But we do know that it has been a distraction for Michigan. And in fact, I heard something earlier today, I believe, with the quarterback play of Michigan, how he had some struggles with Harbaugh not on the sidelines the last couple of weeks. So you wonder. I have to believe that Harbaugh's presence will be, or in this case, his absence will be impacted on the way that game flows.
Mark, we'll talk more about this on the college football show that you and
Good.
I host on our Lads YouTube channel on Friday. But do you have any take on the game here?
Well, you're looking at, again, a rivalry situation with a big double revenge chip on Ohio State's shoulder here. And I think what's awfully distracting is the fact that Jim Harbaugh, that whole situation, the ugliness of it, and the fact he's not going to even be on the sidelines in this game, that cannot be at all beneficial to Michigan. And all you need to do is look at how far down J.J. McCarthy has dropped in the Heisman Trophy race. He's disappeared, is what he really has. He hasn't thrown a touchdown pass since October 21st. That was against Michigan State, and that was the last game that Harbaugh was on the sidelines. So he's missing Harbaugh terribly, J.J. McCarthy. I think the Buckeyes have got a good chance in this football game.
Victor, you have a take?
Yeah, I got 2 cents worth. The over-under line of the game is 46. That's the way I'm looking. And the numbers suggest a down in the trenches, low-scoring game. Obviously, Wolverines are number 1 in scoring defense, number 1 in total defense, number 1 in defensive touchdowns. They're second in pass defense. Buckeyes, number 2 in scoring defense, number 3 in total defense. But where I've made my wager in the game, Andy just briefly touched on it, is that I'm not playing the full game total. 46 is a pretty low number for a Big Ten game if you're not involving Iowa. And in fact, I believe Iowa's over underline this week is 26, 25 and a half.
Oh.
But that's a whole nother story. But this is a low over underline for a Big Ten game. But Andy, what I am playing, or what I did already bet, is under 23 in the first half of this game. And you just said it, Andy, when you said both teams have started out very, very slow in the first half of their games before they gain momentum in the second half. Both teams have brought home the bacon big time in first half unders. And that's the way I bet it, first half under 23.
Okay. Lastly,
I'll throw a stat out at you here, Greg, about that game.
Sure.
We put this in the newsletter here. If you go back and you look, there have only been 6 season-ending games that have been a matchup of undefeated teams, like this is. And we, a few of them obviously are Michigan and Ohio State, but the underdog in those 6 games has won 5 of them straight up and cashed all 6 times.
Wow.
yeah, look, I'm a Michigan fan, and I'm picking Ohio State. So, okay. So a couple other quick things. First of all, Chip Kelly, does he deserve to be fired?
Well, I know there's plans in place.
I'll say no because of the improvement that this team has shown defensively this year in what's been a very offensive-oriented conference.
Be good.
I got to take a little sidebar swerve on this here, Greg. A good friend of mine is Howard Eskin in Philadelphia, and he's a talk show host there, real popular. And he knows Chip Kelly real well. And we were talking last week about his UCLA game with Southern Cal. And I asked him the same question. Is Chip Kelly on his way out there? He says, truthfully, Chip Kelly doesn't give a shit if he's there or not. He says he's got more money than he'll ever have the rest of his life.
And he'll find another job.
Answer. Yeah.
So money does buy happiness.
Yes, it does.
Surprised that the New Mexico State Aggies are only a 2.5-point favorite at home against Jacksonville State.
Didn't that line move quite a bit here recently?
I think it did. I think that they're currently an underdog. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I think
Oh,
they
it's
are.
going further down.
It's
There's a big move to Jacksonville State here.
Right. 2.5 to 3-point road favorite now for Jacksonville State.
Okay, something must be going on. They must be sitting their quarterback or something.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll tell you what's
play
going
New
on there,
Mexico.
Greg.
They play at Liberty next week for the
yeah.
conference
Well,
championship.
that's what's going on. They're in the championship game,
They're in,
conference
yeah.
championship game.
That's right.
They're not going to risk injury. Their quarterback was kind of half-assed, doubtful the last 2 games. So I'm sure he's probably going to rest, and that might have been confirmation that the New Mexico State quarterback will likely be out of this football game.
Do we have a Brady Hoke trend? He's retiring. It's his last game. No bowl. So is there like a trend for retiring head coaches or just a feeling maybe not a trend, but whether or not you think they're a 5-point dog over a Fresno team that's playing for nothing after they were eliminated from the Mountain West Conference chase as a 26-point home favorite, losing to the Lobos last week. So
Doesn't he always keep popping up like a bad weed somewhere else, Brady Hope?
I'm sure he will.
I've not been able to get a sense of what the players feel about Brady Hoke, because if they liked him as a coach, if they play hard, if they feel that he still has something to contribute, and this is just a down year, they'll go out and play hard for him, which I could certainly understand. And I might prefer that side anyway, given what you said, Greg, about Fresno State and the poor momentum they've had over the last 3 or 4 games. You have to wonder, I think they're already bowl eligible, so this game doesn't mean nearly as much as I think it would for a team if they do indeed are not necessarily looking forward to the departure of Brady Hoke.
Yeah. And Fresno, I think, is also like 1-7 maybe against the spread in their last 8, something like that. Some really bad trend.
At one point, they were a top 25 team, Fresno State, maybe like 1 month into the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've just fallen off the map.
Yeah. Quick notes before I hand it back over to Andy for his weekly pick. The tiebreaker scenario for the AAC, the Mountain West Conference, and the Sun Belt, and the Big 12. So there's some significant information there. I did a video on the Our Lads YouTube channel. I broke all of that down on Sunday, so that's available if anybody wants to check that out. We'll talk more about that on Friday's college football show. But there's some confusing tiebreakers in the Big 12 and a few other ones like UNLV. If they lose the game to San Jose State, they might be out. They're done. They might not even be able to play for the Mountain West Conference Championship. So we'll talk more about that. And I also wanted to, before I let you go, read a couple of comments from our viewers. And I'll do this on a weekly basis as well. Jeff Todd it's a Kobasiuk. Jeff Todd Kobasiuk. I think that's
Jeff Kabasiak.
Kabasiak. That's better than Kobasiuk.
That's our Canadian musician friend. Yeah.
All right, good. I butchered that to hell. Anyway, Jeff said great stuff.
He doesn't know it's Slovenia. That's Kabasiak. Come on, get it right.
He said great stuff as always. Thank you, guys. And Martin Paradis. San Francisco versus Baltimore Super Bowl, guys. You're getting it free from me today for the excellent picks you've given me. So there's
he could be right. He could very well.
I would not be surprised if that is, betting wise, the favored matchup right now if you were to take a look at all possible combinations.